Welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Real patriotism requires that you challenge the government. You challenge your political party when it is wrong. The United States is not divided between Democrats and Republicans, but rather between those who seek knowledge and the truth and those who choose to stay and live in ignorance. Ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. It is, however, the ignorance of the ignorance which represent the greatest danger to society. It is what turns an ignorant man into a lunatic. Thus lies the danger, the peril even of a man, a community, a state, a country, yes, even a society. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Indeed, it does. We've seen it, have we not? We've witnessed it. We are all living it, are we not? All men are born ignorant. Many have chosen to stay and live in ignorance. Only a few recognize ignorance is indeed the root and stem of all evil and choose to be ignorant no more. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, answer the following two questions. Question 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a non-rapist? Question 2. Would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, question 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a non-rapist? Question 2. Would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? your time is up, obviously. If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered exclusively to you. You should stick around. It is enlightening, educational, and informative. Join me here on the fourth branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the fourth branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. Hello everyone, I am MD, your host for the Fourth Branch program this afternoon. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, because we have to continue the conversation of something less enticing, less delicious than probably the Thanksgiving dinner you had yesterday. It is the conversation in regards to an agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, E.P.A., an agency that sounds pretty boring, however, has an importance the most that any agency in the United States has. And we will show you, as we have already started the conversation, that it is indeed the most important agency in the country. And yet, presidential election after presidential election, Republican candidate promise to get rid of the agency if elected to the Oval Office. As mentioned prior, the E.P.A. was created by a Republican, Richard Nixon, in 1970, in order to address a very important issue in our country, the environment. to protect the resources that we use, water that we drink, the air that we breathe, and of course, all the various activities that we humans make in this planet that jeopardize our very existence. It is the biggest irony. We have read, we have learned, we have studied, we have observed that other animal species have developed very, sometimes intelligent, you would say, strategy in order to protect themselves from the environment, to protect themselves from predators. For instance, we know that butterfly, for instance, has developed the ability to change colors in order to prevent their complete destruction by other predators. We have learned that also there are some animals such as porcupine who have developed an ability to protect their own skin, their own body from large predators. The human species, which has labeled itself as the superior animal, seems to be the only species which is self-destructive. Instead of looking for ways to protect the human species, we, the superior animal, seem to be very aggressively looking for ways not only to destroy ourselves, but to destroy the very planet, the only one thus far which has offered the ability for us to exist. Ironic, isn't it? Those animals, those species that we deem inferior, seems to prove, at least instinctively, very intelligent species. Why in the world we, the mankind, the human species, who are so smart, who are so intelligent, are so eager to destroy our very existence? Fortunately, up to this point anyway, there has always been a group of individuals who are smart enough, who have distinguished itself from the rest in order to help preserve mankind. As such, in 1970, the Richard Nixon administration proved it necessary to create an agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, whose primary job is to clean up the environment, to protect the environment from debris, from radioactive activities. Today, however, we have an administration, the Republican administration, who has done everything that imaginable to get rid of all rules and guidelines placed exclusively to protect us. The water that we drink, all rules and guidelines are removed. And companies that produce chemical, radioactive material, toxic material, now are free to do whatever they so please with the waste, courtesy of the Trump administration. Now, in order to provide you with a certain level of understanding as to what that means for mankind, maybe you don't care. Or maybe, as you have learned from other ignorant, such as those at Fox, who are so gung-ho to discard science, to reject science, and tell you what they think about life, something that they pull out of a hat just to feed to their audiences, Maybe if you don't care, then that conversation may not mean anything to you. But if you have any concern for the future generations, for your kids, for your grandkids, for your great-grandkids, and if you have any concern for the future of the country, and if you're so inclined to have any concern for mankind, this conversation is absolutely necessary. They have said that there are two types of people in the world: those who cannot change and those who will not change. I very often say that your ignorance is of concern to me. Why? Because ignorance is not private nor personal. Ignorance places a very heavy burden on society, because your ignorance does impact me, does impact the rest of us, does impact the country we live in, does impact the planet we live in. Selfishly, I said that if your ignorance was going to only impact you, it would not have mattered to me, because you would have just paid the consequences of your own ignorance. But unfortunately, that your ignorance cannot be ignored. As such, it has become my duty and those of others who are concerned about the future of the country, of those who are concerned about future generation, to make certain that you are well aware that you, as well as anybody else living in this country or in this planet, ought to pay attention to our activities, to what we do, to what science says, to the kind of information that is imparted to us by science. You may not believe in climate change. It doesn't matter. However, your activities in this planet impact the rest of us. There was a time when the earth looks like something that, like this, an actual world where there is just one small, well, not small, but one global world. According to science, that was a simulation that's provided by those who have knowledge, who have information, who have studied, to provide us a snapshot of what Earth used to look like. Now, the blue side of this image represents water. As you can see in that picture, 220 million years ago, most of the earth was together. Now, I'm going to show you in a 4-minute video the transformation that has happened since then. And I will come back to discuss what happened next. And the reason it is that important discussing the E.P.A. is because it is directly related to the transformation in our environment. 220 million years ago, I wasn't born yet. I'm sure you weren't either. So many of our ancestors. But the earth was one block of earth, only slightly separated by water here and there. Today, however, it is a very different world. And we will take a look at that world, as I mentioned, in a 4-minute video, and we will try to understand what that means for our environment. Now, we weren't here 220 million years ago, and you might also as usual, with the Republican constituent, with the Republican audience, discard the fact that those things are just, well, scientists provided those information, so they ought to be discarded. But fortunately for us, who believe in the science that is provided to us, those changes continue to happen, and we are capturing them in real time. So for those who simply discard or reject science, it doesn't change anything in terms of the type of transformation that are happening in the world. But ironically, the very individual, Republicans in particular, who reject science, who reject the fact that climate change, are the very people, when a disaster strikes, they yelling and screaming to the top of their lungs, and they want the government to do something. They want the government to save them from catastrophe, from tragedies. All the while ignoring the fact that those things happen to our planet, predicted by science, the same science that they are so eager to reject. So let's take a quick look at the video, and we'll come back to talk about a few very important people who live in our planet, who are helping us going through the process of the transformation of our environment, and to once again provide you, the reluctant, those who are unwilling to change, the necessary information to understand that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency here in the United States, need our protection. Let's watch. Pay very close attention to the blue aspect, to the blue side of the transformation that's happening right under your eyes, as you seeing the shape of the earth shifting here and there from a few million years to the next one. And the label on the top left corner represent the name of the era that scientists use in order to refer to those millions of years when they are talking among their peers. Of course, left for us to understand as well when we are reading and learning about those different transformations of planet Earth. Those changes that you're seeing happening in front of you. Some of them are caused by the shift in the tectonic plates, which we talked about a few weeks ago. This is there are 5 major tectonic plates on planet Earth. Now, there are smaller ones, but the major ones are the ones that when shifted, they break the crust of the Earth, which is what you're watching right under your eyes, that as those shifts are happening, the water, the ocean, are pretty much moving in. Once those breaks happen between different parts of the Earth, the ocean moves in and fills those voids, if you like. Now, those are not caused by humans. They is just natural evolution of planets, natural displacement. Sometimes a meteorite would hit certain planets, and Earth is not exempt of that either. And that shakes the very foundation of our planet. And that helps also shaking those tectonic plates that link two different sides of different parts of the Earth. The changes you're currently watching, as you see on the label, is what the scientists predict it will be like in the future, 250 million years. 250 million years from today. Now, that is assuming we, the human species, are still in existence. We have tried to explain for the past few episodes that we have been doing a lot of damages to our planet here in the United States. We, mostly the Republicans, constituent, the Republican Party, the Republican legislators have been very aggressively working to destroy this planet that we have. Well, this country. And the Trump administration, the first move that Trump had made was to place as the administrator of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, someone who's number one, doesn't believe in climate change. Number two, doesn't believe there is any reason to have any of the rules, guidelines, and regulation to protect our environment. And on top of that, he just doesn't believe that those regulations are good for business. As such, he has spent 18 months in the Trump administration completely destroying most of the rules, most of the regulation, most of the guidelines that were placed from the previous administration. Now, we will show you, as we have been promising, that there is a reason for the EPA, for us, the constituent, to protect the Environmental Protection Agency. That particular agency, as mentioned at the top of the program, is the most important agency in the country. Yes, we have other agencies such as the CIA, the FBI, whose job is to protect the nations from foreign enemies. But despite that, those agencies cannot do the job the EPA is responsible for, which is to protect our environment. We need water, without which we cannot survive. We need the air to breathe, without which we cannot survive. Now, if those basic elements, those basic resources are no longer available, just a small quiz, what would happen to the human species? Water is no longer available, or we can no longer drink the water. air is no longer available, or we can no longer breathe the air. We, as a human species, would cease to exist. The connection between what I just said and the EPA is that agency is responsible to make certain that the air we breathe is safe, the water that we drink is safe. But what happens when that important job is not done? Now, many Republicans simply discard the idea that this is not necessary because, well, we have been living for many years, and those who are making the decision about the EPA, they determine they're not going to be around to see the disasters, the catastrophes. So why should they care? Suffice to make a few dollars today, suffice to get campaign finance money today, and that's all that matters. I mentioned earlier at the top of the program, if we're concerned about future generation, if we're concerned about our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, and the future of the country, we cannot act in a way that takes away their future. Yes, it is probably true we are not going to be around to see the disasters caused by our actions. We are not going to be around to see the disaster, the impossibility of our kids or our grandkids to breathe or to drink the water that we left behind because they are contaminated. They can hardly breathe because the air is so contaminated. We're not going to be around to see that. But should we leave such world, such environment for them? Just because today it is so easy to take a few dollars for campaign finance money to get reelected and let companies just pollute our water, pollute the air that we breathe? Should that be the case? In the last episode, I made reference to a particular phenomenon that's been happening across the world. On our shores, a number of sea creatures have been washed dead on our shores. And it's not one or two of them, it's hundreds of them across the world. And there is a reason for that. They're not dying of old age. They're dying because the water that they're in is contaminated, is polluted. As such, they can no longer live. They can no longer sustain life because sea creatures naturally live in water. And it is presented to us. We have proof that when the very basic resources that those creatures need to survive, when those resources are can no longer sustain life, they die. We eat sea creatures as a form of food. What happened when those creatures, those that did not die, despite the contamination, despite the pollution, what happened when those survive and we end up feeding on those sea creatures? What happened to those birds who did not die of the air pollution or contamination and we end up feeding on them? As mentioned prior, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, once contaminated, we as mankind as the human species will pay the consequences of not doing anything about it. Some 42 years ago, someone, an administration, was smart enough to understand the importance of cleaning the environment, keeping it clean, removing pollution, removing contamination. And yet today, despite technology, despite having acquired more knowledge, we are determined to continue to destroy the very environment that we have, the only one that we have. When we return, we will show you something that happened and that should send chill to your spine if we continue the process of destroying the only agency whose primary job is to protect the basic resources that we, mankind, need to survive. There is no other way around it. We need water to drink. We use the water to drink. We use it to cook. We use it to take shower. And for a number of other very important or basic tasks. The air, we breathe the air. Contaminated or not, we have no choice because the oxygen that we need is available for us in the air. But when the air is contaminated, when the air is polluted, we also inhale all the pollution, the chemical get into our body. But the question I usually have, that I still wait for an answer from those who are so gung-ho about letting chemical company pollute our air and our water system. What happens when we can no longer use those resources? What happens if we're still alive and now find ourselves in that very predicament? Today, there are plenty of effort being done by science to find another planet that can sustain the kind of life that we need. But we are very far from getting there. So the only planet we have, the only habitat we have that can sustain the lives that we have is here, planet Earth. It doesn't matter whether you believe in climate change. It's totally irrelevant. The changes that I just showed to you in that video that show you the transformation that the planet has been going through, planet Earth has been going through, is completely independent of what you believe. Whether you believe it or not is totally irrelevant. The fact that it's happening and we are observing it, we are watching it, we're simply eyewitnesses of that. The only thing that is asked of you is to protect the agency which is responsible to protect the resources, the basic resources that we, the human species, need in order to stay alive. But what has always puzzled me is how easy it is to simply ignore all those verifiable information that are provided to us and go along with some political party that's telling you this is not needed, this is not necessary. Dwayne Wire said the highest form of ignorance is to reject something you do not know anything about. And that is the irony of the whole thing, because those individuals at Fox, they have the resources to find those information. They have the resources to actually get their hands on those information. But it is easier for them to stay and live in ignorance and at the same time dumbify their audiences to go along with it. And that is the danger of our society, of our planet. The biggest danger that we have in this United States of America is not a division between Democrats and Republicans. Yes, we'd like to think so. They like to set it that way so that it is easier to manage. Because that's why when you tune into Fox and you hear ignorant individual parting information to you, like the Bible says, it's the blind leading the blind. And they do that for a very simple reason. It's because the only way of life for them is to make certain that you stay ignorant, because if you do not stay ignorant, you move away from them. Their source of revenue, their source of income disappear. So your ignorance is important to them. That's the only reason they are so gung-ho about making certain that you do not go and seek for knowledge. It's a blind leading a blind. But your ignorance and theirs, I cannot ignore because it impacts me. As I mentioned at the top of the program, if your ignorance simply has effect on you, I would not care, because you choose to be ignorant, then you should pay the consequences of your ignorance. But because ignorance does have impact on our society, your ignorance is not private. Your ignorance is not personal. It places a very heavy burden on society. So it is important to point to you that you are in ignorance when it comes to this matter. I'll be right back. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then.
Anywhere. The Fourth Branch program will return in just a moment.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
$220 million years ago, this is what planet Earth used to look like. Now, fortunately for us, we have a number of scientists of different background of studying our planet to provide us with certain pieces of information that can really help us make decisions. Now, the question that especially those who reject science always ask, how can we possibly know that was the case? There was nobody to provide that piece of information. Well, there are a number of sciences that provide information that are readily available in our world. The cosmos, the universe, has information that our technology allows us. Of course, you have to be part of those studies to understand. For instance, our paleontologists are scientists who study fossil, for instance. Their job is to take a look at those very old, what you would call bones, those very old bones, and try to figure out what time frame the species, the animal species, lived in order to try to get a sense as to how old the universe is. I'm not here to give you a study on the universe, but the purpose is to kind of give you a sense of certain species that used to be and no longer are. And in order to understand as to why that is, we have to kind of go back a little bit in the past and work our way to the future, to the present rather, to kind of see not only the transformation the planet has been ongoing, actually the universe has been ongoing, but also as to what we as humans can do, and directed almost exclusively as those who are so eager to reject science, to kind of get an understanding as to why science is important, but at the same time that science is actually giving us information that a lot of them are at this point are verifiable information. So a paleontologist's job is really to study those old bones, and some of them date millions of years. And how do they find that out? We'll get back in a short little while. But there is another scientist whose job, the geologist, whose job is actually to study solid, liquid, gaseous matters, and it works in collaboration with the paleontologist we just mentioned. And the reason for that is because those material in our cosmos, in the universe, they leave traces of time. The gas, the liquid, the matter that is in the universe, in the air, for instance, oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen and so on and so forth. They do have information that the geologists can take from a particular species, a particular a bone or rock, and be able to tell you that this rock, for instance, has been around for millions of years. It's not out of a hat that these geologists come up with that kind of information. So it's not something that if you do not study that particular science, you cannot just take a look at a rock and say, well, this rock has been around for 2, 5, or even 10 years. But fortunately for us, the geologist who is versed in that particular aspect of science is able to take matters, materials, and apply certain ingredient into that matter, that material, and come up with very accurate information as to how long that matter or that material has been around. And I might as well mention that geologists also are the people that usually business people turn to when they want to find out if there are oil or gas or mineral in various areas of the world. So those people, they're not just passing information that are good for us, for mankind, but they also help businesses. So in a sense, you would say that the geologist is in a better position than the paleontologist, because a paleontologist really is really for the love of the science that you do it. Not that there is no practical purpose for it, but it's not practical in the sense of a business to do business. But the geologists, on the other hand, although they do that for the love of the science as well, but they do benefit of some of their knowledge as well. Now there is the volcanologist is a scientist whose very aspect of the study is the volcanoes. Those are the people, although they have also some sort of relation with the geologists, but their very focus is to study the volcano. How does volcano get erupted? What makes that happen? Now, the reason they're so related to the geologists is because they do also study the rock, the solid and the liquid. How do they erupt? What causes the volcanoes to erupt? What kind of interaction between the various gas that reside in the center of the earth, and at which point, what kind of interaction, what kind of trigger that get those things to erupt and, of course, give us the volcano. So a volcanologist usually would be most interested in finding out the interaction between different material that reside within the earth crust and understand why at some point they're going to erupt. Now, why is that important? We'll see that really in our in our next program, which is tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. But today I'm kind of laying the basic, the foundation, so that we can have a sense of the importance of the kind of transformation that happens to our planet. Those specifically that I'm talking about, you cannot do anything about, because those are natural movement of the earth that happens that we pretty much cannot do much about. But we are looking at those so that we understand that even without us, the human species, without the destruction that we bring to our planet, there are already a lot of different activities that are happening inside the crust of the earth that would cause very huge damage to our planet. So we don't have to add to it. We already have enough problems. Now, those individuals, those scientists, their job is actually to study those phenomena and let us know about them. For instance, when there is going to be a hurricane, our meteorologists would tell us that that's going to happen. When there's going to be a volcano, now we have those individuals in our local stations that are giving us those type of information, but the scientists behind those are not the meteorologists. Those are kind of the individual at a much lower level in the hierarchy of what is happening to our planet. Now, I already mentioned the paleontologists, who are not really as close to the kind of thing that happened. They simply there to study things that already happened. They study the bone and try to understand exactly at which point those creatures used to be around. Now, the geologists are pretty much more in tune of what's happening here in our planet. The volcanologist also is most related to the kind of eruption, the kind of movement, the kind of phenomenon that are happening to our planet today. Now, there is another very important individual, is the seismologist. Now, the seismologist happen to study the kind of the movement that happening to the earth that gonna generate earthquake. For instance, when there is going to be an earthquake, it is pretty certain today with the type of technology that we have that the seismologists can easily warn us ahead of time. So for the past decade, I must say that there has not been any earthquake that has happened here on planet Earth that would have escaped the knowledge of a seismologist, because we implant a lot of equipment in deep inside the crust of the earth that provide those individual information way ahead of time, before the earthquake comes really at the surface and start really wreaking havoc. The seismologists would have already warned us way ahead of time, because they already started to read the movement that the earth has been making in particular areas, of course, has been making. So they know, because of those type of movement, very soon in that particular area we're going to have earthquake. Now, again, those are phenomena that we cannot do anything about, because it is naturally happen to our planet. Now, indirectly, we cannot claim responsibility. Indirectly, however, there are certain things that we do that exacerbate the situation, that precipitate the situation. We're not going to be dwelling on that, because we want to get back to showing you how important E.P.A. is in the grand scheme of things, in order not only to preserve mankind, but at the same time in how related all those things that we're talking about are. And I'm going to show you tomorrow in our next episode, we're going to show you why this is so important, because we're going to talk about creatures that used to exist and no longer are. And there is a reason for that. Not because they committed suicide, not because they killed themselves, but because it was no longer possible. Life was no longer sustainable for those creatures. So when we're talking about those things, we're not talking about that in the void. Now, for those people who are always rejecting science, thinking they know so much better, now I would like to understand, how in the world would they know when there is an earthquake coming if it weren't for the seismologists? How would they know that? You see the dilemma in people who pretend to know what they're talking about? Those ignorant at fault that are telling you about climate change. You see the problem? They could not possibly tell you there is going to be an earthquake because they cannot even spell their own name, let alone tell you there is going to be an earthquake. They had to rely on the seismologists to tell them that's coming. And guess what? Every time the seismologists tell you there's going to be an earthquake, it's going to be of such size, of such strength, that's exactly what happened. Where we would be without a seismologist. So it is always mind-boggling to me when those individuals at Fox, ignorant as they are, trying to create more ignorant individuals and telling you about climate change. What exactly do they know about climate change? Absolutely nothing. Again, I'm not here to preach you about climate change, but to make a very important point that the individual that you are listening, you are paying attention to at Fox, they do not know what they're talking about because they have to rely on science to provide important information in order for us, mankind, to be able to react or to act accordingly. When an earthquake is coming, the seismologists tell us about it and we make preparations so that we do not get caught by that catastrophe, by that disaster, by that event, by that. And what can anybody at Fox tell you? Can you think of anybody at Fox who is smart enough to warn you of an earthquake coming in some part of the world? The answer is absolutely not. Because they too have to rely on the scientists, the seismologists, to pass that information. See where I'm going? Because when you're hearing those people talking about something, I guarantee you they have no idea what they're talking about. But they rely on you, your ignorance, your gullibility, to accept what they're telling you. When a hurricane is coming at some parts of the world, who's going to tell you that? An ignorant at Fox? Sean Hannity? Tucker Carlson? Laura Ingraham? Fox and Friends? Who is going to tell you that? They have to rely on scientists to provide them with that information. See the problem? When you listen to someone who don't know anything what they're talking about, the highest form of ignorance is to reject something you don't know anything about. And at Fox, that's pretty much what you have on the menu every day. And that is a problem for the country. Because the problem we have is not a division between Democrat and Republican. And I said that, and I keep saying it because people have been pushing the idea that the country is divided. It's so divided. It's between Democrat and Republican. And I have cracked the code. It's not. It is a division between those who seek knowledge and those who choose to stay in ignorance. That is the big division in the country. I guarantee you, for those at Fox that are pushing the false information, if they were to seek knowledge, they will be talking about the exact same thing everybody else is talking about, Democrats or Republican. It's totally irrelevant which political party you belong to. Because if you have the knowledge to talk about any topic, you will not sound like a Democrat or a Republican. You will sound like a knowledgeable individual. And that's what's missing at Fox. People with knowledge. And because of that, actually, that is the very reason today we have a very big problem with the Environmental Protection Agency. Not because it's Democrat that's talking about climate change. It's not because it's a Democrat that want to push the idea that climate is changing. Democrats didn't invent climate change. Democrats did not. I guarantee you, there is not people, politician in general, they are masters of deception, but they're not smart enough to invent anything. We have to rely on scientists, depending on their field of work. We have to rely on them to pass us information about different aspects of what's happening to our environment. The seismologist is the scientist who study the activities in the crust of the earth. They study activities in the past. They had to be it used to be necessary for those individuals to take trips to various dangerous places in order for them to come up with some kind of information for the rest of us. Today, thanks to technology, they're able to place different pieces of technology in different parts of the world, especially those more prone to those type of activities, and be able to read those information and tell us and warn us about it. And that is a good thing. Now, what is there to reject? Just because you don't know, just because you are too gullible to realize that you are listening to individuals who are too ignorant to know about those things, blind leading the blind. As I mentioned several times here, 82% of people, viewers, Fox viewers, are ignorant of facts and truth. And there is a reason for that. Is because they follow individuals who have no understanding of information, no understanding of what they're talking about, but they rely on your gullibility to accept whatever lie that they say, because that's how they survive. If you stop accepting lies from individuals such as Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Fox and Friends, and so on. I mean, there are a bunch of them, just a few people at Fox. I mean, a couple of them, you can count them in one hand. A couple of people at Fox make it a point to actually do real journalism. But Fox in general, it is a guarantee if you tune in, you become dumber than you were prior to listening to Fox. And that is a problem for me, because your ignorance impacts me as well. So I cannot just do nothing about that. I cannot just not say anything, because, as I mentioned earlier, your ignorance is not private. Your ignorance is not personal. It impacts me, it impacts the country, it impacts future generation. And those individuals that are giving false information, they're not doing it because they're not in a position to find the actual information, but because it benefits them. The dumber you are, the better it is, because they continue to make money. That's how they create controversies. Why do you think climate change is such a big controversy between Democrat and Republican? Is it because Democrats are right, Republicans are wrong? No. It is a big controversy because Republicans rely exclusively on your ignorance to accept the fact there is no climate change. And what do? You go along with it. But if you pay attention to actual information of scientists who know, we wouldn't have a problem between Democrat and Republican. When a seismologist tell you there is going to be an earthquake, I'm actually surprised so far we haven't heard from FOG that, hey, don't pay attention to those people. They don't know what they're talking about until the earthquake comes and engulf you down. Yes, scientists are the ones that have the knowledge to provide us with that information. So when a geologist tells us that there's going to be a volcano in some parts and it is the size of the volcano and warn us to leave the hell out of the area, can Fox do that? Do they have the knowledge? No, we rely on the volcanologist to tell us that information. He is a scientist in that field. So we know for certain that there is no reason whatsoever other than to create controversies between different political parties because it benefits certain individuals. Not because it's true, but because it benefits the pocket of some individuals. So it is better for them for you to stay ignorant, because as long as you are ignorant, you're going to continue arguing with the other side that already realized the knowledge, the importance of the information, but you simply decide to stay in ignorance. Tomorrow, when we return, we will provide to you the information about animals that used to be part of our environment. Just like we're seeing today, hundreds of sea creatures are being washed ashore dead. And if that trend continue, at some point, you can go to sea and find no fish, no sea creatures. And if you fast forward that to the future, the new generation will say, how come there is no creatures in the water? But not because there is no creature in the water, it's because they're all dead. The problem? The water is now contaminated. So we human are heading towards that type of self-destruction. In order to avoid that, not only we have to embrace E.P.A. and protect that agency, but we have to make sure that it is provided all the necessary financing and resources to protect our environment. Our job is not to destroy it, because the E.P.A., as it stands, is the most important agency in the United States of America. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the 4th branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment. I do thank you for spending the time with me, and I hope the information has been of some use to you. Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. we'll have our next program, as I mentioned earlier, in which we will dissect further information to show that the transformation that our planet has been undergoing And added to that, the activities that we have been taking that contribute to destroying our planet, how that has precipitated the fact that some of the creatures that used to be here with us are no longer. And we will, of course, as usual, provide suggestions as to what needs to be done in order to continue to clean our environment so that we can sustain life as long as humanly possible, or until such time when science is able to find, locate another planet where we human can live in. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon or evening, whichever that happened to be. Hopefully, I'll see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.